Welcome to the Sleeping Barber podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Barber's Brief, coming to you live from Calgary, Canada. I'm V. He's Mark.
I'm Mark.
Yeah, you are. If you're a new listener, we use this forum to discuss what's caught our eye and then use it the last couple of weeks. We also highlight our marketing moment, get into an audience Q&A, and ad of the week. Now, if you're a subscriber already, deep and heartfelt thank you goes out to you. Mark, good morning.
Good morning, V.
How's it going?
I'm good. We got snow yesterday, in the mountains anyway, and it was awesome.
We did.
It was the first time we had skied powder all year. It was great.
Actually, before we kick things off, huge congratulations to you for assuming the position of the president of the Calgary Marketing Association. So congrats, my friend.
Yeah,
Thought I'd
thanks.
call that out.
Yeah, thanks. I'm
I know
excited about it.
president.
It's gonna be really good. Yeah, and I started my own company a couple of weeks ago too. So
That's right.
Yeah, it's really exciting. There's lots of
just
fun things happening right now.
You're just knocking things out of the park, my guy. I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
right.
let's get into this. Yeah, it's awkward
Yeah.
talking about me. Let's talk about us, other stories.
What do we got first here?
I think.
Oh,
we're
it's me.
talking about. Yeah, e-marketing.
Yeah. It's me. So paid search outperforms paid social, with the latter far more likely to bounce. So while on the surface, this doesn't seem like it would be any sort of like newsworthy, I thought what was interesting about it though is we have gone down this path of like really looking at performance marketing through the lens that, hey, there's been an overinvestment in that space. There's likely, maybe a little bit wear out, I guess, if you will. But it also shows just how important some of these tactics still are. So there was a study that was done by eMarketer where they looked at the bounce rates based on channel. So the highest bounce rate channel right now is display ads and retargeting. And I did not expect retargeting to be there at the top. Whereas the lowest bounced channel happens to be paid search, even ahead of organic search, which again for me was a kind of an eye opener. So paid search has a conversion rate 4 times higher than anything on the paid social side. The paid social bounce rate is roughly around, they benchmarked this, and it was multiple industries as well, but 61.7%, whereas paid search bounces about 43.9%. And it actually was reduced year over year, which was last year was, I think, in 2022 was 44.0%. So it begs the question, paid search still attracts more high intentional visitors, while social media visitors may not be in the moment to purchase yet.
Yeah.
That's not saying, I'm not trying to say this like social is not effective or anything like that. Right?
No, I get you.
All I'm saying is like in the moment when you're trying to drive short-term sales, social may not be the channel that you're looking at primarily. Marketers also should align their investments with their campaign objectives. I know that's really, I guess that's naturally what we should be doing. But really looking at things, taking that one step further, really customizing those landing page experience depending on what channel they're coming from to really kind of, serve the right content in the right moment and really kind of help deepen that understanding of the audience's digital journey. So I just thought it was interesting. Not all is lost on the performance marketing side.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. I mean, the bounce rates being at like, say, 40%, 44% for paid search. I mean, not surprising that paid search is better.
No.
Paid social, like the job might be different for each one of those
Yep.
channels.
Yep.
But also the bounce rate there, like it seems really low. And even for display ads, like 66%, that seems really
Totally.
low. Like I haven't seen a report lately in the last little bit, but I feel like 70, 80, 90% often.
I've
Like
100%.
it's strange that it's so low there.
Yeah, this data was analyzed by Content Square. So they published this report and eMarketer picked it up as well. Again, I'm sure there's nuances by industry, but I think the point still stands that each channel is meant to do something different.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a good one.
What do you got?
Speaking of KPIs, AI comes up again, V. Here we go. It's almost like we might as well just have a standing spot for AI every week. This was kind of interesting, though. I thought there's a story from that was a survey that was done by MIT Sloan Management and the BCG. They looked at they surveyed over 3,000 executives, and what's essentially is happening is they're starting to look at business metrics and the interdependencies between business metrics to try and figure out how businesses work, like the way Moneyball does for baseball.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Okay. You had me at Moneyball.
Yeah. So half of the executive survey said that they need better, more impactful, forward-looking KPIs so that they can better align people, processes, prioritize resources, and generate value. Makes sense.
Okay.
1/3 of businesses, their executives that were surveyed, said that they're using AI to start to try and understand the actual drivers of business. And
Okay.
so they're calling this kind of idea about using AI to figure out what the codependencies are, 3D metrics. And
Mhm.
so with some of the results they've uh, gotten or reported on so far, for companies that are using AI in this way, like a Moneyball,
Mhm.
there's a 5 times increase in the effectiveness to align incentive structures with objectives
Okay.
compared to legacy KPIs. There's
Mhm.
a 4x increase in collaboration between employees. There's a 3x increase in effectiveness at predicting future performance, a
Okay.
3x increase in improving financial benefits, and a 2 times improvement in efficiency overall.
That's crazy. Well, so first of all, like that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Um, my question is, what are those forward-looking metrics that they're talking about?
Well, yeah, that's a good question, and I think it probably it didn't go on to say that, but I would imagine it matters based on the industry that they're in.
That's fair.
If you're a manufacturing based industry versus a retail industry versus professional services, like all those metrics are going to be slightly different, I would imagine.
Mhm.
But it kind of reminds me of like that in the movie Moneyball, how there's that one scene he's like he's a 5-tool player or whatever, whatever
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
expression.
yeah.
He's got the stuff, and like there's a lot of that kind of stuff that I think is happening with old school KPIs and metrics. And so now they're able to better figure out how businesses are actually generating value beyond just this sort of rule of thumb that people had always told themselves. And I think we're seeing that in marketing in general.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one, and I have just a quick example. So just like in work last week, we were talking about various KPIs, and I asked a very simple question. It's like, so the numbers that you're sharing with me, are they good or are they bad? Like,
Mm.
what does this number actually mean? So
Hmm.
the comment was around like 16% of our traffic is coming from paid. I'm like, okay, cool. Is that good or bad? What
Yeah.
does that mean? Is there a magic number we need to be aiming to? Like,
Yeah.
and it's funny because immediately the reaction is like, well, we don't know.
Yeah.
It's just commentary.
It's a
Like, well,
number.
so, yeah, right. And it's one of those things where you have to be like, well, okay, cool. Let's make it mean something. So let's either triangulate some data and say, okay,
Yeah.
when paid traffic is at 16%, what does that do to our orders, our order
Right.
volume, or whatever? Like just little things like that to kind
Yeah.
of like say, no, we have a benchmark. We need to meet this as a
Yeah.
threshold. And I would argue that could be like a forward-looking KPI
Yeah.
potentially, to kind of
Totally.
help position yourself as you continue to move forward. But anyways, yeah, that's really interesting. And I think what I love most about that is like where does it go? 4x increase in collaboration between employees. I love anything that touches like the culture part, the people coming
Totally.
together. I think
Totally.
that's important here.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and I think a lot of it when it comes to KPIs and incentive structures, especially, like you can get so fixated on the incentive that's in front of you. We talked about this with
Yeah.
Eddie,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
the tooth fairy analogy. You know, what's
Totally.
mine and how I get paid and how I'm rewarded. That's what I'm going to focus on, not
Totally.
necessarily what makes things better for the organization.
That's a good point. I forgot about that. You're right.
Yeah. What else you got?
All right. So you probably saw this hit your feed as well, but the deal between Walmart and Vizio,
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that. So like it's starting to raise concerns about retail media walled gardens right now. So we already had the two biggest walled gardens we were worried about are constantly like navigating. So like in Google social, everything from Meta's perspective. Well, now you have a lot of these retailers that are really building these called like media arms, like for them. But it's also becoming one of those another walled garden,
Yeah,
right? So Walmart's acquisition of Vizio for $2.3 billion, which is insane,
it's a lot
right?
of money.
I think Walmart's kind of, I would argue they're probably looking at this media arm through a totally different lens than a lot of other operators right now.
Yeah.
So basically, it helps bolster its position on the connected TV front. We know advertisers are moving there as much as possible from a measurement perspective, et cetera. We even talked to Angela last week about that, indicating a shift towards those media premium advertising channels. So it's a no-brainer, I guess, from Walmart's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I talked a little bit about it, but like, so it raises concerns that retail media could mimic past digital platforms, so leading to few dominant players
Mm-hmm.
establishing walled gardens akin to things like Google, Meta, and potentially limiting those options for brands relying on Vizio's data sets. So this is
Right.
where again it becomes like, are we now kind of overcorrecting a little bit? Um, Advertisers using currently Vizio's viewership data for media planning and buying may need to turn to Walmart, reducing their options and potentially increasing costs of accessing their data sets. Again, it almost becomes, I don't want to call it a monopoly because there's a lot of providers, but like immediately what that now changes the landscape on how people actually use Vizio moving forward. Um, the I'll just touch on one last point here. I had a few more, but the reality is like Walmart Connect, so that's their retail media arm.
Yeah.
Um, Actually saw significant growth year over year, especially for fiscal 2024, and the acquisition of Vizio essentially aims to further expand that scale. And it's really interesting for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like the whole retail media space is just exploding. It's really interesting to see these players, the
Totally.
traditional, like in this case, retailers,
Yeah.
um, looking at other opportunities to generate revenue.
Hmm.
And then, the way that they're thinking about productizing their inventory and all that. Like it's a fascinating space. Like I don't have much to say about it, but it's just really interesting.
I can't speak to the actual retailer, but what I do know is a lot of these companies are actually looking to use this as a way to generate marketing dollars to reinvest. So
Right.
it becomes the hub where if you can generate X amount of dollars come from this, let's put that back into our own marketing activities. So it
Yeah.
becomes a way to offset it. So it's almost like go chase the dollars as much as possible so then we
Yeah.
can reinvest ourselves. So it doesn't become a similar like cost to the business the way
Right.
traditional marketing is.
Well,
So that's
think
an
about
interesting take.
yeah, like think about Amazon, how it works.
Yeah.
You as if you have your own store in Amazon, you can use the Amazon platform to advertise and promote and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Think about like now a grocery store that's got, I don't know, 40,000 SKUs or 50,000 SKUs, whatever it is, Canadian
Yeah.
Tire,
Yeah.
all the major retailers in Canada, they're all in that kind of position where they've got tens of thousands of SKUs,
Tens
and
of
those
thousands.
brands are all potential revenue
Yeah.
generating opportunities. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Talk about a high intent audience too, right?
Totally. There's so many stories that we're talking about today that are all linking together. It's great.
Without us even trying.
Yeah.
This is how good we've become.
It's a mind meld.
What do you got next?
We talked earlier about collaboration, so here's another one.
There we
Well,
go.
kind of related to that. So let's file this one under DEI. So there's
Okay.
Marketing Week. Um, Marketing Week does an annual career and salary survey.
Hmm.
One of the things that came out of it was that there's massive ageism in marketing. So on one hand, we keep talking about, like, in not you and I, but in general in the business world, about
Hmm.
DEI.
Yeah.
And so okay, so I looked this up. So the US in the US, the like there's an organization that looks at age groups and the percentage of people who work within age groups. So in the US, in all industries, the
Hmm.
number of, or the percentage of people who are under 45 working it's 30% of all the population that are fit into all industries
Mm-hmm.
are under the age of 45.
Okay.
In Marketing Week's career and salary survey, and I think this is mostly in the UK, but let's just put an asterisk on that and put that aside. 70% of marketers are under the age of 45.
That's
So
crazy.
it's crazy. Like you miss out on so much opportunity by not hiring older people that have experience. Like it and have an understanding and awareness. And it's almost like you're never creating institutional memory because you're always hiring new young people that are relearning the same thing over and over and over again.
When I saw this, it actually bothered me. In the context that it's, I feel like I kind of see it. If I'm honest with you,
Totally.
and even if I think about like how long it took me to actually find my next role,
Yeah.
and whatnot, it's one of those things that starts, kind of like permeating your brains. Like, am I aging out already?
Yeah.
Like, I'm right under that cusp. Like, I'll
Yeah.
be 45 in November
Yeah.
of this year. And it's one of those things when you think about it, it's like, do we as marketers always have to think about what's next? Because our next comes a lot quicker than anyone else.
Yeah.
Like, accountants aren't worried about this. If you have an accountant that has 30 years experience, like, yeah, give me that guy.
Yeah.
That guy knows all the in and outs, right?
Yeah.
When it's a marketer, though, it's just like, oh no, you're probably not close enough to the latest, the greatest.
Yeah.
You're probably,
Do they understand Discord? Do they get TikTok? Like,
right? Like,
yeah.
that's and I think that's it could be a fundamental flaw just in the way that we perceive our discipline.
Totally. Yeah, I just thought that was fascinating when I was really, I mean, it's such a big difference.
Dude, it's not okay. That's what I'm going to say. It's not okay.
Yeah.
Anyways.
What else you got, V?
Well, we actually talked about this a little bit in a roundabout way, but so Marketing News Canada reported that, a lot of organizations are starting to shift their workforce requirements. So it's less about the degree now, which is a really interesting shift. So some Canadian companies are shifting away from requiring a four-year degrees for certain positions, opting instead for skill-based hiring. Some of those companies include Accenture, IBM, Google, Okta, that are really at the forefront of really kind of dropping that as a requirement. And are actually looking for, like, what are some of those internal training and online certificate programs that actually apply to the role
Right.
a lot more.
Right.
The government of Canada actually is also investing in skill-based training to help for work integrated learning programs to support more inclusive workforce as well. So I think when we look at this and all, all these combined efforts really kind of help provide more opportunities for Canadians, regardless of their backgrounds and degree requirements. And I thought I kind of like this, to be honest with you. Even if we think about something like digital marketing really can't be taught at school because it changes so much, right?
Yeah.
You can get the fundamentals. You can get some of those things. Yes, I get that. But like, you can also get fundamentals from online courses.
Sure.
Like,
totally. Yeah. Like I did Mark Ritzen's mini MBA. I've said this before. It was amazing. It was the best marketing course I've ever taken. Exactly. We had Grace Kite on. I know she's offering courses. I would rather take a course from her than, to be honest, the MBA marketing program that we took together. It's so much more practical and so much more useful.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really interesting take. And thinking about my own kids, I mean, I don't know if it's going to be worth it. Like, the cost of, I mean, I want to send them to university if we can.
Yeah.
But I'm not so concerned about it if they choose not to, because I feel like there's so many other options that are out there now too, which is great.
I agree. I think where it does help, it can help to some foundational elements. So coming out of school just gives you something, but like, I don't think you need to overcomplicate it or look to get the master's degrees and things like that. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Marketing moment.
Case study. Yeah.
You're up. What do you got?
So this is a case study from Mark Ritson on YouTube. I'll put the link in here in the show notes, but it's awesome. It's a great case study that he's highlighted on Febreze. There's an
Mm-hmm.
award-winning ad. They won an Effie's for this. So the case goes back a few years, but it's still really relevant, which is why I love it. So Febreze was facing a ton of competition from Glade and Airwick. They were losing their brand attribution to the thing that they thought was most important, which was odor elimination.
Mm-hmm.
Over a 3-year period, they were losing sales as well, and so there's this gradual decline.
Right.
So, and we've talked about our shared experience once before where there's a sales dip and we're like, oh, let's do something. And so we
Yeah.
did something. We ran a campaign. Um, Febreze is owned by P&G. So rather than just doing something, they went back to the diagnosis and they went and did market research to figure out what the problem was. So they used a combination of qualitative and quantitative research.
I love
So
that.
things like focus groups, ethnography, they deprived customers of products to see what they would use instead and what they missed from Febreze. They looked at all their loyalists and said, or not all of them, but a sampling of them, what do you love most? They did shop alongs to figure out how people will actually interact with a shelf space and like listen to what they're thinking about.
That's
Then they
amazing.
did attribute research, so quantitative stuff. They did pre-testing on the campaign strategy. And what they ended up deciding on, well, they're not deciding on, the strategy was we need to increase sales. We're going to target moms between 25 and 65 years old. And the idea, one of the things that came out of the qualitative research was this. There's a quote from one of the people that they researched about something about like,
Mm-hmm.
even in the dirtiest places, if as long as it smells nice, then it will be great. And so all the
That's
data
fair.
they had kind of was able to coalesce into that one kind of idea. And so they took this idea that no matter how filthy the place is, as long as it smells nice, then we can win. You know what I mean? And so they
Okay.
linked, took that idea and they built a campaign around that, and that was some of the pre-testing that they did. And
Mm-hmm.
so they built this. You might remember this, but they blindfolded real people visiting like awful, like it looks like what was that movie where they're like drug addicts and diving
Mm-hmm.
into the toilet and all that kind of stuff. What was that movie called? The heroin guys.
Oh my
Ewan
gosh.
McGregor was in that.
I
Anyway,
don't remember.
Train Spotting. Is that it? Anyway, it's a horrible, like imagine the most disgusting looking place. And so
Okay.
they blindfolded people before they walked them into these rooms. And then they asked them, and they sprayed Febreze around and they asked them, describe what you smell. And people are saying things like, oh, it's floral and lilac and fresh laundry and it smells like a beach. And then they take the blindfolds off and people are just like,
It's a pigsty.
hello, hello, did you guys, is anyone here? Like, and they were just
Yeah.
horrified and terrified. Then they did things like, so that was all the campaign TV stuff. Then they did things like they sponsored the smelliest events, like massive yoga events, the garlic festivals, things like that. Then they had POP stuff that matched some of the
Yeah.
messaging. And so in a really short period of time, they reclaimed ownership of that brand attribute. They had competitor ads that were running were incorrectly attributed to Febreze. Like 84% of them were incorrectly attributed. So they're stealing market share from the other competitors
Right.
or mental share. And then they had a massive sales spike over the next several months.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, like it's just such a great case study. And what I like about it is just the idea of like before moving into action, and not everybody has the liberty of doing all the research that P&G does because they don't have the budgets. But the idea is like try and diagnose the problem. Like going back to those KPIs, like try and figure
Yeah.
out what it is that's actually driving the business result and then moving into action because it's so easy just to do something and not really realize what you're actually doing. You're just doing something for the sake of looking busy.
Man, I love this case study because of what you just said. It goes back to true diagnosis of the issue that you're facing. Like, think about our shared experiences. How many times it would just be like, sales are down, we need to rebound. What are we going to put into market? It
Yeah.
was the knee-jerk reaction was the action that marketing need to take to
Yeah.
change the fortunes of the company,
Yeah, and it was
right?
often like, well, what are we discounting? What can we put on sale?
Exactly. So we were working with the buyer groups. We're like, "Hey, can you put this shoe, whatever, on sale?
Mm.
Because it will really help us drive whatever the case may be." And
Yeah,
I think that's the problem that of many organizations that fall into this trap of short-termism,
yeah, yeah,
right? Where you're
totally.
just,
Yeah,
if you remember, even then, we would go week by week, and we would basically say, what was our comp to last year, the same fiscal week?
yeah,
So if it was even remotely being flat or down, you knew the week that you were walking into. It
yeah.
was going to be a hellish week in the context of there's going to be last minute things that we're going to be asked to do because the company never felt comfortable in that or
Mm-hmm.
comfortable in the overall strategy that we were either charting to say, don't worry, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be okay. We can't compare. Actually, one of our shared leaders would say this all the time. You can't drive a car forward looking in the rearview mirror,
Yeah.
even though he was the biggest catalyst of a lot of these like short-term
Yeah.
events that we were constantly pushing. But it
Yeah.
was, yeah, that for me was, yeah, it's a great example of just like taking a step back. Like, let's really understand why our sales are not going in the direction that they need to be, or we're
Yeah.
losing share.
Yeah.
Great example.
Yeah. Audience Q&A, right? We've got one that I thought was really interesting. Christian Hullums wrote a good blog post and tagged me in this, but his question essentially is, or his comment on the post
Hmm.
was, do you think we're interpreting intent as demand, or do you think interpreting intent as demand is misleading? So we were talking about search before.
Oh,
So I
perfect.
let me give
Go
you a
ahead.
bit of a spiel about what I thought about that, and then you can comment on it. So intent, like a search program or a search paid search plan,
Hmm.
um, like it's I don't. There's lots of questions around intent, and just because somebody clicks on something does not necessarily mean that they're actually you're generating demand. You're actually it's not at all. I don't think that you're
No.
generating
Yeah.
demand. But also intent to purchase isn't the same thing as I clicked on an ad. My example on this one is I've been looking at
Okay.
this watch for a long time. Um, I have an intent to buy this watch, but I've been looking
Mm.
for like a year and a half. Like I'm interested.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in the watch, but just because I'm clicking on it, who knows? Like I don't know when I'm going to buy it. I don't know when I'm going to get it. Maybe it'll be for my birthday or something like that. But I've been looking for a long time. But the things that they're not seeing are like all the other watches that I'm also looking at
Yeah.
and the physical, like I'm going into the store and doing that kind of stuff. So just because it happens online doesn't mean like just because I'm typing in something into Google doesn't mean I'm actually intentionally going to buy it. And it's for sure not that they're creating demand.
Do you want me to jump in?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the way I interpret this. I agree. You're not generating demand. If you're doing anything, you're generating interest, right?
Yeah.
So I think intent is one of those things that is one of those definitions that we kind of use very loosely in our space to say like even when I think about it, like when we're trying to adopt high intent channels, what you're essentially trying to do is whittle down to those that have shown the most interest in your product or service. So the way I see this, do you think interpreting intent as demand? I would say no. Intent is interest to research, interest to purchase, interest to inform, interest to fill in the gap, right?
Yeah.
Um, but it still makes sense for us as advertisers to target those high intent audiences or those that have shown the most interest in a category, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
to do things like build mental availability, build consideration, build all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, no, it's not demand. I interpret intent as interest,
Mm-hmm.
not intent to buy.
Yeah.
Because I think that is if you're approaching intent that way, then you don't understand the signal that what it actually is doing. Because I would argue you could use these high intent audiences for broad reach campaigns as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I would interpret that.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, I thought it was just an interesting question. Okay, out of the week, V.
Out of the week. Out of the week.
Out of the week.
José Mourinho. Have you?
I love how you said that. Do that again.
José Mourinho. Mourinho. So I don't know if you've seen this ad yet, but it's basically, do you remember Topps?
Kind of.
Like the stickers, the collectibles, trading cards.
Yeah.
This is going, I don't know, maybe you weren't.
I wasn't a big card guy,
them.
but yeah.
No, I was. Okay. So it's one of those weird industries where I think there's a resurgence kind of, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so they partnered with José Mourinho.
Yeah.
And he's in the lead up to the Euro 2024 this year that's happening. Basically, he positions himself in the ad as the one that's basically going to take them to the quote unquote, here's the air quotes, top. Right.
Okay.
So there's a lot of puns within the actual spot itself. You know, it shows like a UEFA Champions League cup mug, but and he tells the woman, "Oh, I have 3 of those," for instance, right?
Okay.
Alluding to the fact that he's won the Champions League 3 times,
right?
He's very notorious for saying like, "I am José Mourinho," like that's like his line.
That's his thing, yeah.
So the guy, there's one guy that comes out with a T-shirt that has that written on him, and he asks him what his name was. His name is Juan, and he goes, "You are the special one," which is also kind of like an odd to him because that he was. I don't know if he dubbed himself the special one or it was like one of those, but it's just really, really well done. And he's basically giving these group of employees a speech to elevate, Topps for 2024 as being like the next level for collectibles going into the Euro. So anyways, I thought it was really creative. I'm a big football/soccer fan. So it really resonated with me.
I got you. Somebody was just explaining to me the Champions Cup yesterday because I don't get it. But it's interesting. Like now that I have a little bit of an understanding about it, it's really interesting how
you're
that's
gonna appreciate it now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's good timing too. That makes tons of sense.
Timing.
Yeah,
it's perfect timing. What's coming up next week?
Well, next week unless things change, we've got Tony Hulwet coming up.
We do.
Talking about jobs to be done and segmenting the market based on needs, not on demographics, firmographics, any of those kinds of things. So it's a really interesting conversation. I know you weren't able to attend that one, so but we'll definitely have the post pod between the two of us that we can.
It was disappointing that I couldn't make that. But it's one of the conversations that I think it's the right ones we need to be having, right?
Mm-hmm.
From a strategic perspective. So I'm really curious to see, personally listen to it, so then we can do the post pod, but more importantly, getting that out there to our listeners, because I think it will likely resonate quite a bit. So.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Even we talked about repositioning a banana based on unmet needs, it's not just even about startups. Yeah, it's great. It's awesome. You're gonna love it.
Okay.
Anyway, V, until next time, go chase profitability. Oh, we did it together. That's great. That was great. All right, buddy.
That just made my day.
We'll talk to you soon.
Before you go, feel free to leave us a review or just get in touch with us. We're always looking to find ways to make the show better. We'll see you in the next one.